I came to the Historical Society for an interview, and I came to the back door of the Catlin House and walked in and saw the library. At that time, it was a much smaller space, a small black table and a lot of files, as there are today. And I was interviewed by the director, who was Mary Ellen Calimo at the time. And because when I was an intern at the Anthracite, I did a lot of work with the library, it was a strong position for library organization and library maintenance. So I fit the bill, and I was hired. I was not a professional curator, but I did have museum studies experience, so I could start to maintain the collections in a professional way. We are very fortunate to have a professional curator on our volunteer staff so that we get the professional mannerisms and skills and talent that we need, but because it's a woman who is on our board and is a dedicated volunteer, we don't have to put out the salary that it would involve.
My awareness of the Historical Society was about 20 years ago, right after I came to Scranton. I was with the National Park Service at Steamtown, and I was doing a lot of research because we were designing and developing the park, Steamtown National Historic Site, and I would come up here to do research using a lot of the maps and the atlases. And at that time, met Dorothy Silva, who was the director, and became somewhat involved at that time, that moment, just because it interested me. I have a lot of historical interests, and local history is one of them. No matter where I live, I tend to get involved in the local history, and have sort of been around ever since in some fashion, some form.
We think of our board, and we're proud to think of our board as a working board. There are a variety of people on our board that bring their particular expertise, their interest to the organization, and they're very willing to share what knowledge they have and time that they have to assist us in accomplishing our mission and our goals.
There have been great changes with the Historical Society. When I first came on the board, it really was not known within the community. To a small group of scholars, it was, and they would come and do research. But we did not really reach out to the community. And over the years, our board has changed, and we have more events for the community and more publicity, and things that really appeal to a wider variety of people. So I think we're touching many more people now than we ever have. And going way back, the Historic Society, it was almost like you had to have an appointment to get in. And now we have open doors, and it's worked very well.
When I joined the Society, it related to only a small percentage of the population of Lackawanna County. From my young and maybe inexperienced eyes, I saw members of what I would call the first families of the owners and operators' children and grandchildren were largely controlling the Society, and it seemed to me that the Society was more concerned with what sort of homes and what sort of furnishings the upper classes had, without paying much attention to the families that did the mining and the railroading and worked in the silk mills. So I didn't become a volunteer immediately. I went to the meetings, and my interest was primarily in railroad, so I found a lot here to do with that.
And this is the famous Barney's Ledge.
I think the Society went through several changes in leadership that really changed its vision into the community. And as they broadened their outreach to all the people in Lackawanna County, they became much more enthusiastic about volunteering.
Oh, we are blessed with our current staff. Marianne Moran, who is our executive director, is one of those gals who can balance 12 balls in the air at one time and not have one touch the ground. And that in itself is an amazing feat. She is also very easy to get along with. She works well with a variety of people, not only within the Catlin House, but also within the community. So she's a great spokesperson for the Historic Society. And we're very lucky to have her.
I think this board trustees for the Lackawanna Historical Society is probably one of the more interesting boards around. That people are invited to join the board because they have a certain skill set. Not that other boards don't have that, but this board doesn't so much give direction to the paid staff, like some of them do, as to actually take the society in a direction. We have 2 architects on the board who give their skills as professionals, AIA members. They'll look at the house, they go through the house, here's what we need here, here's the problems. Like one day we had a gutter blocked up, and I contacted one of the architects, and he said, oh, here's how you fix it, very simple. Oh, okay, didn't enter our minds.
So, I mean, we're very much an alive organization. It's an exciting time to be here. I mean, we are a sort of vital asset to this area, and we have the potential to be more.
I'm very proud to be a trustee of the Lackawanna Historical Society, and our main mission is to make policy and to oversee the physical needs of the society. We meet every month, and we are 18 members, and we are a working board. You know, there are a lot of boards that the members just come and sit and smile and nod their heads yay or nay. But we are a small organization. We don't have a big staff. And so almost every board member is actively involved in some aspect of the Historical Society.
But working on, you know, moving chairs and doing heavy lifting, and no one ever complains. They all do it. And then as they move up and they find their talents and how they can relate to the Historical Society's activities, it's amazing what they contribute.
Actual acts of volunteering consisted of helping out at the Christmas parties. So I've been the dishwasher at the Christmas parties for about a dozen years, I guess. Yeah, I didn't lose the dishwasher part, though. So I'm secretary of the board at the moment.
My first experience with the Lackawanna Historical Society was in 1992 when I came to the University of Scranton for a pre-orientation. So when I came up here, I actually decided to come here without my parents because I thought nobody in their right mind would ever bring their parents to a pre-orientation. And I was wrong in that because pretty much everyone brought their parents and I was the only person that didn't. So I got a lot of sympathy because everyone thought either A, I couldn't make friends, or B, my parents didn't like me. So I noticed the Historical Society, so I crossed the street, came over to the Historical Society where I met MORAN, who is now our executive director. At the time, she was just an employee here. And I introduced myself and said that when I come to school in the fall, I'd like to volunteer. So I filled out the membership card, filled out the volunteer card, and that was basically it. I didn't get a tour that day. I had to wait till September to get the tour.
And Marianne is trained as an anthropologist, so tends to have an anthropology approach to things, whereas a historian just takes the situation as it is and perhaps doesn't allow for a point of view. We're trained not to have points of view, while anthropologists perhaps are. And presently we have Marianne Gavrin and Anne Marie O'Hara, and they're both very knowledgeable. They'll just sit around chatting and talk about history and talk about what they remember. It's fun to listen to them.
Since I've been on the Board of Trustees, and again, I think it's coming up on 30 years, I think the biggest change has been for the Lackawanna Historical Society in its achievement of more professionalism, in the fact of having a professionally run full-time organization with whom I was able to work. And that's been a tremendous help, not only to the officers and to the board, but to the members as well.
The Lackawanna Historical Society's most important treasure are its volunteers. These are the people who make the organization successful. They are dedicated beyond comprehension. And within our volunteers, that includes our trustees. We have what everyone refers to as a working board, which is so fortunate because we have people on our board who have been members of the Historical Society for 40 years. They have done their own research here. They have found a connection to the organization and then joined it.
Trying to understand why anyone really gets involved in a historic society or any kind of historical group. A lot of it has to be obviously a very personal type of thing. For myself, as long as I can remember, since I was a child, I always had a great interest in Scranton history. It might have been because of my father, who always talked, he grew up in the 20s, always talked about seeing Babe Ruth, about going down to the vaudeville shows, about what a lively, dynamic town it was. So that even though I was growing up in the 1950s and 60s, I almost felt as though I had a connection to Scranton when it was at its peak, when it was one of the great cities in the United States where people wanted to come and where it was lively, and where there was a lot of activities, good and bad.
Working with these records, with the coal mining records, it's so interesting to see, you know, you really do get to follow these guys' lives. Like you know, George Brill, he passed away in the mines, and every month Jen and I had gotten used to these guys appearing, you know, every month in the same order, you know, like the one guy would appear first and on the sheet, and then one month we came across George Brill and it was crossed out and it said died in the mines, and we're like, oh gosh, that's awful, you know, and it hits home. You're like, you know, you don't know these gentlemen very well, but you see someone that, you know, was working pretty hard, 260 hours a month, and, you know, he just disappears the one day because of an accident in the mines. So that's a little bit shocking, and it is interesting just to see. Sometimes you'll notice on the paper that the gentleman can't spell. You know, a lot of people were illiterate at that time, and what would happen is when they came to pick up their pay, the paymaster, someone else would sign for him. And on some sheets, all of the signatures are signed for by the paymaster. You know, like they could not write, they could not read. But then you'll come across the paper and it's really touching to see like this horrible script, and they're actually signing for their own pay. And, you know, someone that could do that really had a lot of knowledge to be able to do that. You know, it was a sign of intellect. So sometimes, you know, that you could tell like the guy was probably really proud that he could sign his own name. And even if it really didn't look very good, like you knew that he signed. So that's very interesting.
The Historical Society to me provides a lot of knowledge, a lot of information. The staff is very helpful as far as researching information, being able to pull it out and show the information to you, and having the ability to spend the time here at the Historical Society to go through the information and to use it. And also, again, just to provide the networking opportunities. The Historical Society seems to have a lot of organizations that it works within the community. And again, that's one of the very impressive things about Lackawanna County, is that the Lackawanna Historical Society works with so many partners in the area in trying to create such good programming for the public.
Then some of the fun programs that I talked about, like the cemetery walks, the church walks, the downtown history walks, the ice cream social, the Civil War ball. There's no end to the programs here, and there's something for everybody just about every month. And I don't know how the staff does it. They have my enduring admiration.
And we did an industrial site survey and worked with the Historical Society. We mapped and located something like 143 pre-1930 industrial sites in the Lackawanna Valley. And we mapped them, and Dorothy Silva, who was one of Mary Ann's predecessors, was the photographer on the job. And actually, Richard Leonori was my architectural historian on that particular project. So,
the person who has had the most significant influence on the Historic Society would be Alan Sweeney, who was our past president. And unfortunately, Alan died 2 years ago. And he was a fabulous leader. He was well known within the community. And he was just a great force to have behind us. We miss him very much.
There was nothing that Alan wouldn't take on as a project. He always had new ideas, fresh ideas, something that seemed completely off the cuff and a little insane. Let's do the last dinner on the Titanic, Mayor, he would say, and I would say, why? And he'd say, well, because the Catlin House was built in 1912 and the Titanic went down in 1912, and it'll be fun and it'll involve food and we'll have a great time. And just the way that Alan did it was so unassuming that you couldn't help but get caught up in it and want to do similar things. So Alan's enthusiasm was one of the real treasures that he brought to his role as the president of the Lackawanna Historical Society.
What makes this one a little bit more unique, in my experience, is the fact that they do so much programming on so many different levels. I don't know how many times over the years I've come into this facility and there have been high school kids, junior high school kids, not just coming through on a tour, but actively engaged. They're volunteering, they're working, they're doing things, they're getting excited about history.
And Rocky Glen, a little brief history of the park, was established here in northeastern Pennsylvania in 1886, and it lasted until 1987. So in looking at it, we had a 101-year-old park in our area that, through its history, had such a major impact in our area. And I looked at the idea that we really had nothing on it. We didn't have a documentary, we didn't have a book on it or anything like that. A friend of mine down in Luzerne County suggested I come up to the Lackawanna Historical Society, and I was told that they have a lot of good information that might be able to help me begin the process of researching on Rocky Glen Park.
And so you always want to do these sort of publications because you're reaching a new audience. It's like the Seven Intelligences, Howard Gardner, native Scrantonian, saying that people learn in different ways. Well, sure they do. Some people are readers. Some people like to get their information visually. Some people get it orally, and so on and so forth. And that's the way you want to get the word out about the resources of a particular area. And in that particular case, it's the amazing architecture. And we're getting ready to republish that publication, by the way. Looking for a couple of sponsors. We cobble together partnerships, and we make a go of it.
The Arts on Fire program that was held in June at the Scranton Iron and Furnaces was a very successful event. We had close to 20 vendors, in addition to about 500 people coming through that day to see the various displays. And because of that, we're trying to plan an event called a Family Day at the Furnaces. A Family Day at the Furnaces, we're hoping just to have people with their families and kids to come out for face painting, for balloon animal making, just various little kids' games that we could let families participate at a relatively free, low cost. We also want to have a barbecue, and in the evening we're going to show the Rocky Glen film on the furnaces. We hope to project it, and I think it would be such a unique idea that we're going to encourage people to bring their blankets and their lawn chairs and sit on the grounds of the furnaces and watch the Rocky Glen film being broadcast on the furnaces themselves.
I began volunteering for the Lackawanna Historical Society about, I would say, 6 to 7 years ago. And the reasons why I started are, number one, I wanted to give back to the community in some manner, shape, or form. And number two, I needed a stress release from the everyday caregiving of my father, who was failing at the time.
You know, my mother's parents moved to Scranton in 1930. So I heard many more stories about the old days of this area from grandmother Keating. That inspiration of history that she gave me was carried on by her son, my father, Bob Keating. He had an encyclopedic memory of the hill section of Scranton, all the families. He would drive through the hill section and tell me stories. I'm not sure if all of them were true, but they were certainly very good, about everybody who lived in every house in the hill section. Well, he was a newspaper boy here for many years and an outgoing personality. So I really got it from my father and his mother, this appreciation for local history.
It's really rewarding to be able to give back and, you know, process this and do something that's near and dear to my heart, something that I'm passionate about. And being able to work here is great. You know, the people that I get to meet on a daily basis, it's wonderful. You know, working with Marianne and Ella and other people that are here during the day at the Historical Society, like Bob Booth is upstairs, and he knows so much. You know, like someone will call and have a question about where something is, or what they're, you know, they have some question about when something is, or, oh, well, where was this located back then? And Bob will just rattle off an address or a phone number. He's got like a photographic memory or something, but it's amazing to see, you know, how intelligent everyone is that works here and how passionate they are about what they do.
Not just in their time and talents, but in their continued service and funding to the organization. They support our programs. They come out to our fundraisers, and they work nonstop. Bob Booth, he comes every day to the Historical Society, and he loves it here, and he does wonderful things for us.
One of my reasons for wanting to volunteer was to give back to the community. I feel I had received a good education in this area. I also taught school, and it was time to give back. My primary thrust is research, but if called upon, I can do just about anything. As far as off-the-wall requests, very often students from the university will come and ask for information about Scranton's red light district. And there's not a whole lot out there. But a retired editor, or a retired writer for the Times has approached us. And I referred him to an individual that I know has a lot of this information, but how he got it, I don't know, and I don't want to touch that.
When I became an undergraduate at the University of Scranton in 2003, I initially thought of volunteering at the Historical Society because of my fascination with the famous shipwreck, the Titanic, as a child. Initially, I was a business major, but I became fascinated with history freshman, sophomore year, and became acquainted with the Lackawanna Historical Society shortly after, and I've been there ever since. So, sophomore year of undergrad work for my history degree, I transcribed a 2.5-hour tape and donated the time and effort to the Historical Society so they can use the information to give color to some of the local practices at the turn of the century. Ironically, the subject of my tape was a former worker of the Scranton Lace Company, which further created my obsession with the company.
I became involved with the Historical Society 16 years ago. I had lived out of town for the majority of my life, and when I moved back, I needed an involvement, and so I found the Historical Society. A friend of mine told me about an exhibit of hats that they had in the living room, and I came down to see them, and it was a charming exhibit, and I met Mary Ann, and I talked to her, and she asked me to volunteer in fashions, which had been my college major. So I started volunteering.
I think one of my goals as a research assistant here at the Lackawanna Historical Society is just to be able to have the satisfaction of helping people find lost relatives or, that kind of information. I know there was a woman from Rochester here a couple of years ago, and she was thrilled at what information we were able to give her, as well as a woman from New Jersey. She and her sister were here back about May, and they were thrilled at what we were able to provide them. Not everything, but the things we weren't able to provide, we gave them a direction where to find that information.
I had been interested in local history, and as I was working for the Lackawanna Heritage Valley Authority, I became familiar with Mary Ann through other projects that we had worked on, and I realized that they had a library, and thought that was fabulous, and it would have worked out so well for some of the research I was doing. I knew some parts of local history stories, but not all of them, and I was looking for places where I could find the rest of the story and the answers to the questions that I had.
Historical Society could not function without volunteers. They are the backbone of this organization. We are fortunate that we have so many volunteers who are dedicated and who are well informed. Without them, I don't see how we could function.
The best friendships I've made have been from being a volunteer here and getting to know people who share my interests, and it gives you a starting point of conversation that then grows into a friendship. Volunteering is good for the soul, I'm convinced. In my job, I also have volunteers helping me out, but I come here to do my own volunteering, to give back something to the community and to people who worked hard in their memory, to preserve their memory and their history.
One project I'm working on now is called Framing Faith, and it's a project I'm doing with high school students, and it is a project. We are photographing churches which are closing down. There are many churches in the area which are being closed down, and a lot of things are, all the content is moved out of these churches, and who knows where it will end up. So we are trying to document it. I am teaching the students photography.
we were living down in Alabama at the time, I was emailing Ella about things that I might do because I enjoyed the cultural resources, the collections management, and she said that she was getting ready to retire also, and that why don't we get together at the Catlin House and work for the Historical Society.
We do docenting. I do the downstairs. I like the furniture in the rooms and what it might have looked like back in 1912 when Helen Catlin moved into the house. Dennis will do the upstairs with the mining and the railroads. I just enjoy getting things put in some orderly fashion and put away. I'm kind of the neatnik that I want to get everything into its ABC order.
I've always been interested in history. I guess it's one of my real passions and real loves, all types of history. And I wanted to volunteer here, but I was so busy with work that once I retired 6 years ago, I could take the docent training and become a docent.
There are so many of all different ages and all different backgrounds. Some are working people, some are retired people, but they all just have, I don't know, it seems silly to say perhaps a devotion, but they just have an energy that there's always room for the Historical Society. And that's really what I think volunteering is. When you do something that you really enjoy or is an extension of a passion that you have or a like that you have, but sometimes you might want to be doing something else, but your overriding draw is your support of the organization or your willingness to contribute to the organization that you're part of. And that's really what a volunteer is about.
I first became involved with Lackawanna Historical Society probably, I'd say like 6 years ago, possibly. I was at least 12 and I'm 18 now, so.
Volunteering is good for the soul. It helps you grow and become part of something beyond yourself. And anyhow, it can do a lot of help, I think, for any individual.
We had an artist in residence in our school, Nancy Hasty, and after we did our little production at my school, she had flyers going out through our school about Under the Lackawanna Moon, which is the play she wrote about the history of Scranton. And I wanted to go for the audition, so my parents brought me here. And I remember waiting in the room all really, really nervous, my first audition ever. And it went well. I got a few parts. And it was just fun to do, and I loved learning about Scranton while I was doing it because I never really knew much about it.
And this particular volunteering allows me to do my thing at my time and pace. I'm not told I have to be someplace at a particular time. But I like helping out. It's been nice to watch the accessions that they've had here for 40 years or so, some of them finally get put away into their proper place.
What a great place to come and become a member and go to the programs and meet other people that have similar interests. So,
I would definitely recommend becoming a member.